Hey, I think it's time to get started. It's 9:34. Sheena will continue to help me let people in the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for attending the April Fire Safe San Mateo County meeting and presentation. This month, I've invited the IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, to present. For those of you who don't know what the IBHS does, they provide numerous objectives that help strengthen homes and businesses and communities against natural disasters and other causes of loss, such as wildfire. We're interested in their wildfire research department, which is very robust and very proactive. And what they're really trying to do is to change the course for all of us in wildfire resilience. So we are lucky to have Dr. Fariz Hadidi. He's been with the IBHS for, I believe, 5 years, and he's the head research engineer for their wildfire research unit. For those of you who haven't ever seen the IBHS lab in South Carolina, they actually have the ember generators inside. They build the test houses and then they turn on these ember generators and actually try to ignite these houses. And the videos are just amazing. And you can see how the houses are igniting. And then they use that research to help with products, materials and methods, to give us information on how we can build our houses so they resist. So with that said, Dr. Hadidi, if you want to go ahead and start your presentation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Glad to be with you and good morning, everybody. As soon as I figure out which screen I'm sharing, this, share, and which screen are you seeing? Like the one that says in presentation mode, fire and embers?
Yeah.
It says embers and flames.
Yeah, embers and flames. Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah. Well, again, my name is Fariz Hadidi. I'm a researcher here at IBHS. You are a non-profit located in South Carolina. And we look at 4 different natural hazards: wind, river, rain, hail, and wildfire. So today I'm with you talking about wildfire and the new program that we launched last year as wildfire prepared homes. There are 2 levels to this designation, and the bottom line is that homeowners could be qualified to take their designation, talk to the insurance agent, and get a discounted rate, basically. While we don't play a role in pricing or anything like that, we just provide the research for the insurance industry, and they use our science to, in whatever way they want, to price premiums.
Interesting.
Yeah. So with that, I want to talk about wildfire prepared home here for about 40 minutes. This is a very casual presentation. If you have questions, jump in. I'll pause and respond to your questions. If you look at the literature, there are 3 ways that, or 3 ways are identified that buildings ignite in wind. Flames, flame radiation, flame contact, and embers. I want to double click on these 3 mechanisms and then connect it back to wildfire prepared home and why we did what we did, basically. So only thick, tall, and hot flames can radiate enough heat to ignite the fuel around them or other buildings. If they are short or small, they need to touch the building to ignite it. And how do we see small flames in the field? Typically, they are generated or started by spawning or when embers land on a fuel and ignited. Within the first few minutes, it's just a small flame. Under desirable situations or favorable situations for the ember, not for us, they can grow to tall flames and radiate heat. And that's the overarching idea of wildfire prepared home designation. There are two levels. One of them addresses small flames and embers, and the other one addresses thick, tall, and hot flames. And that comes in when we're talking about the plus level. So with that, roofs are, move this around here. Where's, I have my clicker doesn't work for some reason. Okay, so the first item that is important in wildfire prepared home is roofs. Roofs are large elevated surfaces that are a prime location for embers and debris to land on the roof. And when these two happen at the same time, so we have debris and then we have embers, well, surface fuel ignites easily, and then we have flames on the roof. And that's not what we want to see, right? Roofs, because of their geometry, they create low pressure and high pressure areas on the roof. And both embers and debris tend to accumulate at high pressure areas on the roof, typically roof valleys. And there are different ways that roofs are being evaluated in the field. You see some stats here. I'm not going to go through them, but the reference and the quotes are there for you to look at the studies. But nearly all post-event investigations report a correlation between roof type and the damage level. And because of that, in wildfire prepared home, we require the building to be, the roof to be a Class A material. That's asphalt shingles, which is 90% of the market is already that. But we also have metal roofs and tiled roofs or things of that nature, which are non-combustible material. Those are also compliant with wildfire prepared home designations. Next is gutters. Gutters are designed to catch stuff, right? And when, again, embers and debris accumulated in the gutter, they expose the edge of the roof to flames. And then we don't want to see that. The photo that we see in the background here is the first ever real full-scale simulation of wildfire prepared home, a wildfire ember storm that we did in the lab back in 2011. Dr. Steve Coles ran the experiments here. So we require all the gutters to be non-combustible. The added benefit of that, beside embers, is that non-combustible gutters typically protect the fascia board or the other wood components in that area, rafter tails, for example. They protect them against flames and they don't ignite. We actually saw this happening at IBHS that we unwantedly ignited the building after the vinyl gutter melts, and then the fascia board was exposed to radiation from big flames, and then we had ignition on the fascia board. Next one is vents. Typically, the attic area is naturally ventilated, meaning it's like natural convection. Hot air gets out from the ridge vent, and then the cold air gets in from the bottom part of the attic. But what happens in a wildfire scenario, because of the elevated wind speeds, the pressure distribution on the roof and at the vents changes. So the outlet vents could become an inlet vent, because again, the pressure outside is higher than the pressure inside, and embers can get in. And the caveat here is that if we see flames coming out of the vents, it's already too late to defend the building, right? So we want to stop this at the beginning, and we require 1/8 of a mesh screen 1/8 of an inch to protect larger embers to get in. If you look at the literature, other mesh sizes such as like 1/16 is also recommended. I think that becomes a maintenance issue, because when it's that small, debris, dust, and all of those other things accumulate and block the ventilation, and we want to have unwanted consequences such as moisture building up in the attic area. And that's why we go with 1/8 of an inch. So it's not a maintenance issue anymore. Yeah, so we require 1/8 of an inch mesh screen. The other very important component that we require to have in the base, in both levels, and I'm talking about the base level here, is a 6-inch vertical clearance around the building. Remember I talked about high pressure areas on the roof? Base of the wall is also another high pressure area that we saw several times at IBHS. We are running a test, we are looking at vents, we are looking at windows, but we see ignition happens at the base of the wall. And that's because the heavier embers, they don't loft. They just roll on the ground as because of elevated wind speed during a wildfire. And then they got stuck against the wall, and the 6-inch around the wall is, if there is a discontinuity between the fuel and the wall, well, the embers cannot convert to small flames. We will have, I don't know, thousands of embers accumulated at the base of the wall, but it's not touching anything to ignite it and converting into flames. So it's just embers. Yeah, we require a 6-inch vertical non-combustible zone. Defensible space. Numerous post-event investigations report a correlation between nearby vegetation and damage level. And in the next few slides, you see some of them. Seifert et al. Analyzed some data that CAL FIRE generates. And the conclusion is if you reduce the vegetation density by 40%, immediately adjacent to the building, the odds that the house survives after the wildfire is much higher. And historically, if you look at defensible space literature, you see the philosophy behind defensible space was to reduce the intensity of the fire as it gets closer to the building. So typically there are two regions, 0 to 30 and 30 to 100, or the property line. And the distance between shrubs or trees or any kind of vegetation gets lower and lower as it gets closer to the building. And that's because of converting tall flames into creeping fires. And these are examples from glass fire. You see like the two photos stacked up on top of each other. That's the same house. There were two places, and this is not a high density fuel. It's just some surface fuel. It's an island of vegetation, but it's touching. And then you see some damage on the building, and it was the fire was suppressed by first responders during the fire. Otherwise, there would be a different story for this house. And the other photo shows again glass fire, creeping fire. Use the mulch to get all the way closer to the building to 0 to 5 foot. Ignite. I think that's like a hot tub there. Ignite that, and then the fire gets to the siding. The other side, you see, there's like a metal barrier, and then there is just soil. So the fire didn't go that way, right? And the reason behind this 0 to 5 foot, why it matters, besides stopping creeping fires, is that embers tend to accumulate at high pressure area. And one of them is at the roof that I talked about, base of the wall, that you clearly see that glowing line at the base of the wall here. And then when embers, the heavier embers, when they hit, they just fall and or they just roll on the ground and accumulate at the base. The lighter embers, when they hit the wall, they bounce back. And you see that glowing arc around the building, right? And that is a function of building height. For a 1-story building, it's like almost half of it. So a 5 feet clearance near a building would eliminate the chance of embers to convert to flames and expose building cladding to different flame intensities. And again, another stat from an Australian researcher, like these are all 80%, 85, 87%, 83%. It's much higher than like 50 or 51. These are statistically significant numbers. Since the 90s, University of Reno, Nevada, they introduced the idea of 0 to 5 foot non-combustible zone. And this was adapted by different organizations. IBHS started advocating for this since 2010, 2011. And then since then, there are more tools available for fire researchers to use and study this. One of them is like the aerial imagery. This STAI, they fly drones around properties and collect the data. And when they look at the 0 to 5 foot non-combustible zone around the building, they found a very interesting stat that it nearly doubles the property's survival rate. And this 0 to 5 foot is what we recommend, but we see in the literature acknowledging embers 0 to 1 foot, 0 to 2 feet, to 3 feet, to 5 feet. All of those are available, but because we don't know, and this is an active project right now at IBHS, we don't exactly know what the risk is if we have something there. We take a conservative approach and go with the 5 foot while we are analyzing some data and running the experiments, and more will be shared with the group or with the public later on as we get more results of this. And this is another test that we designed. It's a design fire, 80 kilowatt fire, and we place the flame into, or the fire source. It's a 2 feet by 1, 80 kilowatt fire in different areas around the building. And we see that, well, in most of the cases it's safe. At 3 feet, at the middle, it's caution. But at the corner, we actually ignited the building and we had to terminate the test. And that's why we go with 5 foot non-combustible zone, because of this research. And this non-combustible zone is not only on the ground, it's a volumetric bubble around the building. The photo that you see here is from a NIST report. After campfire, they released several reports. Each one is like a few hundred pages. But like this graph actually was really interesting to me, that it's like a ladder fuel. There's some fuel on the ground, likely embers ignite that, and then the fire uses the fence to go up, ignites the tree, and the distance between the fence and the building that you see is burning is about 6 feet. And in my opinion, while I don't know the exact number, but the trees extend into 5 feet zone, or 5 feet volumetric zone around the building. And that provided a pathway for fire to get into the eave area. And this all happened in like about 2 minutes, 140 seconds. The bottom line, we require a 5 feet non-combustible zone around the building to acknowledge embers and creeping fires. Fences are another source of fuel that exists in the 0 to 5 foot. Can you see my screen? It's very choppy on my end.
Yeah, we can see it. It's yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, these are again experiments that the Steve Cole's done back in the day, about 10 years ago at IBHS. And we see that how fences burn and how they can provide a pathway for fire to get to the building. You see 3 examples of glass fire, marshall fire, and campfire. In marshall fire and campfire, the fence was defended, so the first responders knocked down the fence and the building survived. If not, it could use the fence and go all the way to the building. The interesting thing here is that in the photo from the campfire, the distance between the eave and the top of the fence is so low that the flames can easily touch. And that's actually like a multiplying factor into the vulnerability of the house if the distance is low and the fence is combustible. In the glass fire experiment, in my opinion, they were lucky that the window was not 2 feet to the right. Otherwise, the fire could break the window and get in. And again, that would be another end to this, another story to this house. So for fences, because of the section that is in 0 to 5 foot should be non-combustible. That's typically the gate or the door to get into the backyard. And there are off-the-shelf products available to use and to be non-combustible, basically. Decks. We studied decks since 2013, and this is still an active project, so it's been about 10 years. Decks are vulnerable to two different threats. One of them is embers accumulating on top and ignite the deck. This typically happens, the fire typically starts at the gap between the deck boards above the joist. That's the first place that ignites. And then it uses the joist to get closer to the building. And this is a very, very slow moving fire. And it takes 5 to 6 hours for the fire to get close, to get to the building, or like travel 5 feet. It's a very slow moving fire. A more severe exposure is that when embers fall between the boards and ignite material underneath, then we have an underdeck flaming feature. That's a much severe exposure, and that can ignite the deck, and then the fire can get to the house. These two videos, so I tested these decks back in 2019. Both of these decks are compliant with Chapter 7A. Chapter 7A refers to ASTM 2632, if I'm not wrong, and that only considers the walking surface of the deck, not the entire assembly. The walking surface in both of these decks are redwood, but the joists are in the left-hand side is the metal joist, and the other one is southern yellow pine, which is a common joist material. And we see the difference, right? And we are writing a proposal to change the ASTM test method. Instead of looking only at the deck or the walking surface, look at the entire assembly, because obviously walking surface does not discriminate the performance of the deck. So in wildfire prepared homes, we require at the base level, we require to enclose the underdeck area so debris cannot get in. And when embers fall between the gaps, they don't have any fuel to ignite. So this was everything about embers. So if you have questions about what I went through, I want to move to flames. Yeah, I guess I can pause here and we can have a Q&A about ember threats.
I did have a question. This is Denise. Regarding heavy embers, I've never really thought about that, and I haven't heard a lot of discussion about heavy embers versus light embers, but it makes a lot of sense. I think we all do realize that the embers do like to accumulate against solid surfaces. A lot of times in these wildfires, there's a wind event, and so these embers are pushed or rolled or blown. The heavy embers, I'm assuming they have more radiant energy contained inside them, so they would stay hotter or they would burn longer. Is there any testing that's been done on the amount of time you have once an ember gets into that right spot on your house, how much time your house has to resist from a heavy ember versus a smaller ember?
That's a very good question, Denise. There are a lot of experiments that look at the thermal energy that embers can carry. But that is mostly about like the density. What the fuck? That's mostly about the density of the embers, or like how many embers can accumulate at different spots, and it doesn't look at like single embers. At IBHS, we looked at how embers accumulate around the building, and we saw that about 50% of the smaller embers are pushed back because of the wind vortices or the high pressure area around buildings. So they all get pushed back and they don't accumulate at the base. But the heavier embers, they spend enough time to get light, so they lose mass as they burn. So when they light enough, the wind vortices can push them back. And at the end of the presentation, I can show you a video from the Marshall Fire that you clearly see the ground traveling embers and how they travel and how many of them travel and go to the next building, basically.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. I think Deborah has a question too.
Yeah, I do. many of us in California have solar panels on our roofs. Have you, has your institute done any research or have any recommendations for how to install solar panels? Are they, do they increase the threat of embers collecting on your roof? Is there anything we should be doing if we have solar panels?
That's it. So we have an active project right now about this vulnerability or the added vulnerability. There are a few studies, mostly done by some Norwegian fire researchers. In Norway, they have 6 months light, right? So sunlight is like 6 months and then there's dark. So they have like continuous 6 months to use the solar energy. And they looked into ignition of solar panels because of electrical circuits or electric circuits and how they can cause a short circuit and ignite it. If they ignite, they expose a very severe fire to the roof. But there is no study that looks at how they ignite because of embers. My gut feeling is that embers, debris can accumulate at the base of the wall, debris can accumulate between the roof and the solar panel and ignite it. And the best thing to do is to keep maintaining like a high frequency maintenance to get all the debris off between the roof and the solar panel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we can open up questions about embers at the end too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I'll move forward. So I talked about embers and how embers can ignite buildings. When the first ignition happens, if we give it enough time, the flame grows and has like a larger surface area that can radiate heat. And that's a different threat to the building. So we need to, the building needs to tolerate or resist more heat exposure compared to small flames and embers. So with that, we looked at outbuildings or like sheds. This is again an active experiment. This is like right now it's happening at IBHS. We ignited different shed sizes, and the one that you see here in the video is a 12 by 24. And we looked at wind-driven building-to-building fire spread. And the distance between the shed and the house that you see is about 30 feet. Every morning we showed up, we tested this, and we collected a lot of data between the two buildings. You see the heat flux trees, and also on the target building. And the video is again choppy for me. And then we change the distance, 30 feet, 40 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet, to see how the building fails and which areas actually fell earlier in the experiment. And we looked at, we categorized the damage into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So total loss is when we have flames, so when the building ignites. Potential total loss is when the window fails in a way that there is an opening so embers and flames can get in. Severe damage, window failure, siding failure, that type of thing is very expensive to fix. Minor damages, very cosmetic damages that can be fixed by the homeowner. And in other words, no professional is needed to fix the house. And no damage, obviously no damage. And you see the different ways that we saw the damage happening. So wood sheds are the brown ones and the silver one is the metal shed. At 10 feet separation is deterministic. 100%, we tested two buildings at 10 feet. In both cases, we had total loss. So similarly, at 40 feet, this is again the deterministic. It's 0% that there would be any damage on the building. What happens between 20 and 30, we get into probabilities that how buildings fail. For example, at 20 feet, so we had 4, 5, 6. We had 6 tests, 4 of them we had severe damage. So 4 divided by 6, whatever it is the probability of we have severe damage at 20 feet. and so on and so forth. We can look at this data like this. One way to look at it is this, that the severe damage is like an S-shaped curve. So at 10 feet, 100% severe damage, and then it rapidly declines as we get away from the building. For minor damage, 30 feet is the maximum, and we will not have any minor damage at 10 feet or 40 feet. So probability density function, one of them is an S-curve, the other one is a normal distribution. So for outbuildings, we require all the buildings to be 30 feet away, and this is in the plus level. So in the plus level, we look at embers and flames. In the base level, it's only the embers. Another thing that exists on the parcel level is fences beyond zone 0. The only requirement that we have is that we don't want any back-to-back fencing. And you see here that this is like a study from NIST. They tested different separation between back-to-back fencing. This is very common in Colorado to have back-to-back fencing, less common in California. And we see like they report that it was like a funnel fire. A lot of like oxygen sucks in from the bottom side, and then it's like a radiation back and forth between the two fences, and the fire was very intense. So the requirement is to remove them. This is one of the experiments we had, that structure separation experiment I just talked about, eaves and soffits. This is at 10 feet, and we see that how ignitions happen. This was a total loss, and we require for wildfire prepared home plus level to enclose the eave area, so the roof, the rafter tails, and the eave is protected by a non-combustible layer between the flames and the eave area. Cladding, this is a photo from, I want to say glass fire. Yeah, this was glass fire. And there was nothing around this building. You see like the torch trees, maybe like 100 feet away. So nothing was surrounding this building, like it was like clear. And the radiation was intense enough to cause this damage from those. And again, only hot and tall flames can radiate enough heat to cause this type of damage. And for wildfire prepared home, the plus level we require non-combustible siding, because those are vertical surfaces that can absorb a lot of thermal radiation from the surrounding flames. And remember when I started, I talked about the gutters. So this is like the case. So half of the building had vinyl gutter, the other half had metal gutter. And the first thing that happened was the metal gutter melts and then expose the fascia board. So we tested this 2 times, expose the fascia board, and the fascia board ignited. So a non-combustible gutter also protects the fascia board against the flames. So for the plus level, the cladding needs to be non-combustible. Windows are vulnerable to mostly radiation and flames. Double pane windows are more resilient than single pane windows. Tempered windows are even better. The way that these windows are manufactured, the double pane window, there is like a pane of glass, 2 panes of glass, and then there is a metal frame in between with some adhesive that puts them together, and there is vinyl glazing that puts extra pressure. When they are exposed to heat, the first thing that happens is the vinyl glazing melts, so there is no extra pressure. And then the adhesive melts and the pane just pops out. So and right now in Chapter 7A, the requirement is only 1 pane to be tempered. If that's the case, the inner pane should be tempered because the outer pane always falls. And we want to have the stronger pane still in place, which is counterintuitive, right? We don't want to wear a t-shirt on top of the jacket. That's how I look at it. But in this case, the stronger pane or the more resilient pane needs to be inside. And we require at least a multi-pane window with at least 2 panes tempered for wildfire prepared home plus level. And there are some anecdotal studies about doors and how they work. Well, this is from Marshall Fire. We see embers accumulated at the base of the door and ignited that, but it was suppressed or self-extinguished, I don't know. But the house survived. So based on these anecdotal observations, we require a fire-rated door for Wildfire Prepared Home Plus. And finally, the under bay area, you see that's the geometry is primed to trap heat. And if there is, and in this photo, you see the vegetation in the under bay area is torched and the other ones are less burned, basically. And we require that area to be enclosed. Everything that I talked about is in this document. You can go to ibhs.org. It's like about 15,000 words, so it's a long read. But yeah, everything that we went through today are discussed and with adequate references and everything. Take a look, and if you have questions, shoot me an email. I'm happy to discuss this more. Yeah.
All right, I want to open up the questions. So again, you can either add it in the chat or raise your hand. I can start off, and I want to go back to gutters, kind of the beginning of your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I know in the code in chapter 7A requires something called like a gutter guard. And I know there's different variations. I've seen a plastic version, and I've also seen a stronger, more ignition resistant metal version. I'm not sure if it's totally non-combustible, but it's a metal version.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of your experiments deal with gutter guards?
The reason for the gutter guard is that they minimizes the maintenance issue. So debris don't get stuck in the gutter. About the fire performance, it should be non-combustible. So metal should be fine, or any other deflectors in that area would do the job. I personally really like these. They like this non-combustible foam. I don't know what the commercial name is, that you can put inside the gutter. So water can, it's porous. So water can go through and you can drain the water, but debris cannot because it's filled. So everything stays on top, and then just wind can blow them away. In short, any type of non-combustible material that minimizes the debris accumulation is what we recommend.
Okay. I don't think in 7A right now it distinguishes, but I'm not sure. I haven't read the most current version of the building code. If it distinguishes between a non-combustible gutter guard, but that would be something to look into and maybe educate our members on.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing I want to talk about that was vents, and you talked about the outlet vent can easily become an inlet vent in a wildfire. I do know we have something in California called the Green Code, and I'm not super familiar with it, but it does deal with a lot of venting, and there are a lot of houses that have automatic attic vents where they have a fan, when they come on when there's have you done any research on those and what happens in a wildfire, as the house is getting warmer and the attic is getting warmer and those fans turn on?
I have not looked at that. That's actually a good question. I need to read about that. But any forced convective ventilation, I would say is probably like a fan from Home Depot. It's not a fancy fan, and they can only resist the extra pressure from outside to some extent. When we have 50, 60 miles an hour wind, I personally don't think those vents can resist the extra pressure, and at some point they just let the embers to come in.
Is that something that you think the IBHS will be researching?
I look into that. Our research plan is already booked until 2026.
Oh,
But yeah, but I look into that and get back to you based on like what I find.
yeah, and I can do some research on the green code and maybe have somebody present to us about exactly what is required for attic venting and things like that. So, and I think a lot of what they are trying to do now is kind of fill the attics, you know, have the attics be smaller and then fill them with an insulation so that there is no space. I mean, that's the ultimate preferred method for wildfire resilience. So if you have a vaulted ceiling or things like that, and you just have a small attic space, you can do that. But on the traditional houses where you have, say, you know, an attic space that's 3 or 4 feet, it's not really possible to do that.
There are ways to design buildings that don't need ventilation. I'm not an architect, but I read about it that there are ways to do that, but it's very, very uncommon, at least in California or in United States.
Right. I do know that in the Woodside Fire Protection District, the code is amended to add fire sprinklers in the attic space. And we do that like on a 16 feet on center instead of just one pilot head, you know, where the access is to the attic. And you know, it's not a very costly add, but it would solve the problem of any ignitions potentially starting in your attic. Okay. Okay, let's go to some of our questions here. Okay, Rusty, you have a long question. Why don't you just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it, please.
Faraz, thank you very much. I've got, it's sort of a two-part question. In the building separation experiments that you've been doing, so far you've been working with sheds, and those are of obviously varying square footage or size and also varying materials. Are you measuring the thermal flux that's generated, both radiant and convective, from those sheds at different distances? And if so, will that data be published?
Very good question. Yes, we do, based on the distance. For example, if it's 40 feet, we have like heat flux trees that we put between the shed and the target.
Yes.
For 40 feet, if I remember it right, we put one at 20, one at 30, and then the building is at 40. The building itself is, there are 10 heat flux gauges, convective and radiative, mounted on the target, on the building. And then we have 6 in between. So we do measure those, and that's like a big part of the experiment. And yes, the data will be published. I'm working on the report. It's about 150 pages. It would probably take a few months to finish it. But I would say for what we see in these experiments, convective cooling plays a very important role that is not considered in before. So all the data available in the literature, they look at cone calorimetry, which is a like 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch sample, and they put under just radiation and look at the ignition properties. But when we add wind to the equation, everything changes. And this has not been studied before. So it probably takes a decade that it gets into the science and the building code. And but yeah, it takes time.
And the second part of my question is, will these experiments extend beyond sheds? Are you going to larger structures? And when might we see the results of those experiments and that data?
Yeah, what I forgot to mention is this project is funded by CAL FIRE. And the plan is so we tested about 12 sheds at 45 degrees. So if the house is, the corner of the house is facing the fire. And then we want to rotate it so it's like 0 degrees and run 8 more tests. So in total, that would be 20 tests for sheds. Then we'll move to ADUs. The shed is about 12 by 24 feet. And the ADUs would be 25 by 25. So something around 600 what, 625? Yeah, 625 square foot for the footprint of the ADUs. And we'll put furniture from IKEA, like real furniture. In these tests, we only had wood cribs because we couldn't burn propane tanks for obvious reasons here. So we put wood cribs in it.
So I'm sorry, but just to follow up, so when might we see the first experiments that you reported today? Those are at a 45-degree angle. Those are not parallel surfaces.
Those are 45 degrees, correct.
Okay,
The
and
last,
that reduces the flux, correct?
very good question. It's a push and pull between radiation and convection. So when we put it at 45 degrees and add the wind splits into two sections. So it's like a good streamlined object for the wind to stretch the flame. So the flames get closer to the building. That means we have intermittent flame contact and higher radiation, higher convective heat. When we rotate the target and put it at 0 degrees, the pressure that builds up in front of a solid surface pushes the flame backward. So the flames get pushed backward, but it radiates more heat because it's not split into two sections. And what we saw at 0 degrees, it was a more intense exposure on the building. You're right, but it wasn't that clear to me when I started the project. We thought 45 degrees is a more intense exposure.
So but it also would have a profound variation with distance. If the parallel surfaces are 10 feet apart versus 30 feet apart, there's a huge difference in the flux.
Correct. So the algorithm that we test these, we put the building or the source, this time shed, let's say at 40 feet. If we don't see ignition, we go to 30 feet. If we see ignition at 30 feet, we go back to 40 feet, confirm that 40 is good, then that's the result. So in the coming up sheds at 0 degrees, we'll start at 30 because we saw ignition at 20 before. We start at 30. If we don't see ignition, we go to 20. And then we probably see ignition at 20, go back to 30 as the safe distance.
And when do you expect to do the experiments with parallel with 0 degrees parallel surfaces?
Second week of July is the nominal start date for the 0 degree tests.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the contents of a shed would play a role in separation.
Yeah, fuel load matters. We know that. I mean, everywhere probably, but in South Carolina, where the lab is, we need to get permission to burn things.
Yeah.
And burning paints or gasoline or propane tanks, as much as I would love to do it, our safety manager would hate me to do that. So we put wood cribs in it, but the amount of fuel in it is on the conservative side of the equation. It's not like just one. We put 15 wood cribs in it, and each one weigh about 300 pounds.
Okay, our next question is from Aaron McCarthy. And I was thinking about this question earlier, so thanks for the question, Aaron. And his question is, have you or will you be looking at testing any of the gels or the sprays, the fire retardants that are out and actually you all listed for protecting structures?
These are all great questions. This is a political issue. We tested them before. For intumescent coating, a bucket of paint is about $500–600, and you can cover probably a few, I don't know, like half of the one side of the building with that. All of these paintings go through weathering. Our research shows that after 6 months of weathering, it's equal to an untreated wood. In other words, if a homeowner is affluent enough to invest that much money every 6 months, that's great. Otherwise, it's probably not gonna do much to protect the house. When it comes to gels, it's like a logistic issue to apply them. So I purchased them off Amazon. It comes with a nozzle that you can put in and spray. The recommendation is to have 1/4 of an inch thickness. It slides off the windows. It doesn't adhere to windows. And it takes a very long time to cover the siding of the building. You need gigantic nozzles to spray these in a time-efficient manner. Like, and I'm not exaggerating. I think if I want to do this to my home, it probably takes like about 15 hours with the nozzle that it comes. So, and then when it's exposed to elevated wind and low relative humidity, it takes about 2 hours for them to dry out. So again,
Okay.
if there are resources to do this with big nozzles right when the fire is coming, spray the house, perfect. But in the real world situation, it's not likely that that's the case. So there is take that with a grain of salt. Yeah. And there are 2 or 3 papers on our website. You can take a look at those and ask me questions more if you have any.
So in
Thank you. That helps.
California, any new structure, maybe not ADUs, but for the most part, single-family dwellings need to have interior fire sprinklers. And I did mention, a bit ago about how we added into a code the attic, but I have seen some houses add an eave sprinkler, kind of like you would in a commercial building. And since that is the ignition zone, unless it's a large flame impingement, that the sprinkler would not be capable of extinguishing. What are your thoughts on that? And will you be doing an experiment of that?
So there is Alan Green, I think his name is. So he's an Australian researcher that looked into this, and I'm working closely with him on this project. External sprinklers are designed to pre-wet the building or the things around the building, that when embers land on, it just immediately quench and there is no small flames. In theory and in practice, that's the most promising active mitigation strategy. There are some questions that needs to be answered, and in my opinion, there are 2 tiers, 2 layers of question. One is on the philosophy. How do we want to provide that much water? Imagine like this group, all of us are familiar with fire. Let's say we are neighbors. Fire is attacking the community. I think all of us would activate it. It wouldn't be let the first person on the edge of the community activate it first, and then the second tier, and then the third tier. So the availability of water becomes an issue. That's one thing. When it comes into the science part, the biggest question in my mind is that all of these companies that sell external sprinklers look at the sunny day. But when we add the wind component to the equation, in wildfires, we have 50, 60 miles an hour wind. The droplets do not land where they are designed to. They are blown away. And if we have dry spots around buildings, when we add the wind, then that would become ineffective. So the question becomes, when we have wind, we know that the droplets would be blown away, but where should we add more sprinklers to protect the building? And that's the question I'm trying to answer. I'm working with 3 of these companies. One is based in California, the other one, 2 are based in California, the other one is based in Colorado. That we're putting sprinklers around the building at the wind to see where the water goes. And this project is pushed back to next February, so February 2024.
All right, excellent. That's excellent future research. David, you have a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
Good.
I can hear you.
On August 5th of this year, we're going to have our first additional fire fair in the county. And I noticed this material obviously is what we're after, to have vendors come in and show their wares for home hardening, et cetera. I noticed right before the end of your presentation, you had a booklet there. I didn't get a chance to take a picture of it. Are we able to obtain some of those booklets?
Absolutely. I'm gonna send the link to the most updated version of that document. Give me a second.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can take a look at that. Again, if you have questions, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to help. So here and here. So if you look in the chat window in the Zoom, you can find a link to
Okay.
it. There we go.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I guess I sent it to Deborah. Let me see everyone in the meeting. There we go.
Yeah, you pretty much answered the question I had about the rooftop sprinklers. It's the same thing. It's a water issue. Yeah.
David, did you get the link?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, and we can post it on our website too, so we can share it and have it for as a future resource. And I did post in the chat some of the other publications, the roadmaps and things like that that IBHS has come out with. I had a question about doors. So you know, the 1 hour door, the 90-minute door. I think we all understand that. My question, and I know there's been some work on garage door thresholds, but and weather stripping. So I know on my door, I have weather stripping, and when that's gone, there's a pretty good gap. My weather stripping doesn't seem like it would withstand small embers or heavy embers. So that's something maybe I need to research. Do you have any research, or has there been anything done on weather stripping?
I have not seen any research, but that's a great point, Dennis. That's a vulnerability. Embers can get in, and if that weather stripping is plastic, that could also melt. The fire-rated door is the best thing that we can find. And I want to double click on that. We saw embers getting into the door jamb and igniting that. So the door jamb is also very important. But there is no product in the market that is non-combustible. Then the next best thing is to go with fire-rated doors. And that's why we went for that. If the door jamb is non-combustible and there is a defensible space, we should be fine. Is there an email contact?
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see like the doormat, they'll say, you know, don't have a combustible doormat, you know, things that are organic, become a problem. Storing decorative items near your door just attracts embers, and your door potentially is a vulnerability with the jam, like you explained, even if you have a fire-rated door, or if you have glass in your door. My front door has a lot of glass in it. So anything that I had stored around my front door, if it ignited, would easily go through the door, which it's not a double paned glass on my front door. So it's a huge vulnerability.
Yeah.
So, and I think these sorts of things, people have a hard time, you know, going through their house and really figuring out their vulnerabilities. But I think some of these booklets and more research, if we can start promoting it, and have people actually do these self-assessments, you'll find that your houses have a lot of vulnerabilities that, you know, that you can mitigate, that you can harden your home, you can fix them. Some items are more costly than others, but we're always doing improvements on our homes. And so why not do an improvement that also helps our wildfire resiliency? Otherwise, it seems like all the other improvements are in vain, but that's
I agree.
okay. Let me keep going here on questions. Okay, Nikki, Nikki would like to have your email contact information. Is that something that you?
Yeah, I sent it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's there. Karen has just a comment about weather stripping is not required in garages. I did think that there is in the building code, there is a tinsel requirement, and maybe that's in 7A or going to come in 7A, where your weather stripping in your garage door had to require a certain tinsel rating, and I'm not sure about that, but I can do some research.
I'm not sure either.
Okay, are there any other questions out there?
Nikki has another one. What about making barns and hay storage more safe for people with livestock? I'm not sure about your question, Nikki. Like,
I think
don't know
she's
what-
talking about agricultural buildings that have,
Yeah, I was thinking about how up here there's a lot of rural areas, so it's kind of like a whole nother risk factor, just because a lot of us have animals and barns and hay storage and wood stacks and kind of like extra flammable things that we have to have, but I'm not sure how to most safely store them. Maybe it's just a question of distancing and putting it in a metal shed and trying to.
Yeah, a
to-
metal shed is a good idea. And if you can put the door in a way that if it opens up, it's not facing the main structure on the building. Because what we see is that the flame always jets out through the opening. And if that's
Right.
not facing the main building on the parcel, well, the flame is radiating heat to other parts. Make sure it's like your neighbors around, and if there's like enough distance, position the
Okay.
metal fence in a way that it's not facing your house.
yeah, and agricultural buildings have a lot of exemptions in the building code in chapter 7A. So unless your zoning area or is required to have the barns so many feet away from the structure or your neighbor's structure, they are a vulnerability, you know, so.
Okay.
Okay, unless there's any more questions, we can end the presentation. and really appreciate Dr. Hadidi, you spending your morning with us. I'd love to do a field trip one day to your lab. It seems just so educational. What you're doing, you're just so ahead of the curve and giving us all this data, which is a lot easier than seeing entire neighborhoods burn and trying to figure out, you know, from the damage assessments. You guys are very proactive, and we'll keep checking in with you on your research. And I know you do post a lot of those research papers, and those videos get published, and we like to spread them around so people can see. A lot of people need to see it. You know, reading about it, you know, isn't quite enough. They want to actually see structures burning, and nothing like burning structures that are in a test lab. So we
Yeah.
appreciate your efforts. It's very important that you continue work, and I'm glad that that you guys are there.
Thank you so much for your kind words. It was a pleasure to meet you all, and I look forward to be in touch with you through email or other presentations.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, have a great day, everybody.